Welcome back to another episode of Right Here in Mass. Joining me today is Jayme Valdez, a licensed mental health counselor and the owner of Clearview OCD Counseling LLC, the first outpatient clinic in central Massachusetts dedicated exclusively to the treatment of OCD and related disorders. With over 2 decades of experience, Jayme specializes in the treatment of taboo and bizarre mental intrusions, treatment resistant OCD, the intersections of OCD and addiction, and the unique challenges faced by the LGBTQIA, BIPOC, and other underserved communities. Jayme, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Ashley.
Yes, it's my pleasure. I have not had anyone who does quite what you do yet on the show. And so I think it's going to be a really interesting, inspiring, and fun episode to have you talk through everything you've been doing. So, for our listeners, Jayme's very impressive history and career experience and bio is listed in our show notes. But, Jayme, I'd love to start there by having you share more about yourself and what you do.
Sure. Yeah, I'm so as you mentioned, I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I'm licensed in Massachusetts and New York at this time. But I own Clearview OCD Counseling, which has two locations now in Worcester and one in Sudbury, so the Boston Metro West area. And we essentially we provide general mental health counseling services, but we also specialize in OCD and related disorders, which would
Mhm.
include phobias, panic attacks, anxiety disorders, skin picking, hair pulling. We see a lot of what are called comorbidities. So there's a lot of disorders that show up along with OCD and anxiety disorders, such as we see a lot of high functioning autism, or what's called level one autism, or it used to be called Asperger's back in the day. We see a lot of ADHD, and especially right now, we're seeing a lot of kind of later in life diagnosed women with ADHD, where it got missed because it was misunderstood when they were younger. And then there's a very high comorbidity of addiction, self-medicating behaviors with drugs, alcohol, but also what we call process addictions, which would include like gambling, phone addiction, uh, things like I'm not sure if I can talk about them on this podcast, but there's a lot of things that people do compulsively that they're very ashamed of and aren't sure where to reach out for help for. And what we really specialize in is kind of the unspeakable stuff. So things
Yeah.
that clients might be afraid to tell other mental health counselors, especially knowing that we're mandated reporters. We
Mhm.
specialize in you got a really weird thought about what if I lost control and hurt somebody, or what if I, you know, did something and don't remember having done it? Does that make me psychotic? Like we specialize in all these kind of weird thoughts that show up for people and also behaviors that they're engaging in that they may not want anyone else to know about. So a stay-at-home mom who's on the PTG, but is also drinking 4 glasses of wine first thing in the morning to just get her panic down enough that she can function for the day. And she's still functioning in her role as a mom and a wife and a volunteer and a worker, but she's crumbling inside. So we try to take the cases that a lot of mental health counseling practices are afraid to take.
Mhm.
And we take a no fear approach to that. We're very passionate about what we do, and we only use evidence-based interventions, meaning that science
Mhm.
has, at this time in history, shown these interventions to work. We don't try new things that haven't been proven to have efficacy yet. And one thing that's different about Clearview compared to even other local OCD practices, because OCD treatment was actually born in Boston, that's where it was
Oh,
invented,
wow.
promoted, and so there's a lot of OCD practices. One thing that we do different is we take a strong interdependent team-based approach. So me and my associates share cases. So I might have one of my clinicians working with a 7-year-old child, and then I'm doing the parent coaching. So the entire family is getting wraparound support. Or another clinician might be working with somebody on reducing their marijuana use, and that person's 25, but then I'm still meeting with their parents and their sister to talk about how this is impacting the family. So
Yeah.
we share cases at Clearview, so that we're not just working in vacuums and only treating one person or one symptom because that doesn't actually work very well. So we provide
Mhm.
very robust wraparound treatment.
That's incredible. And from what you've shared, I think it's amazing that you've provided this safe space for people where previously they may have gone somewhere else where, like you said, they didn't feel totally comfortable sharing something so vulnerable. You've been able to create this environment where they know that it's okay to share thoughts that others may judge them for. And
Yeah.
that you're able to support them through that process to find the right solution and treatment or whatever it might be.
Yeah. And, we see this a lot, just as an example, with like postpartum anxiety or postpartum OCD, where, um, and it may be a gestational parent who carried the baby, but it can also happen to adoptive parents or a non-gestational partner. We've worked with grandparents who've had postpartum symptoms because they're the primary caretaker for the infant when the parents go back to work. But we see this a lot where somebody's getting intrusions about like, what if I threw the baby over the balcony?
Yeah.
Or what if I forgot to feed the baby? Or what if I accidentally smothered them while I'm taking a nap next to them? And then they think because they got this thought that it's going to come true or that they'll act on it. And then, of course, they're terrified to tell a mandated reporter because our job is to report to DCF, and so they're
Right.
afraid to tell us that those are the clients that we love to work with because we get to say that's just a thought. It doesn't
Mhm.
actually have anything to do with your behavior. It's an alarm bell going off saying, don't throw the baby over the balcony. You're misinterpreting it. And we're here to help you understand better what to do instead, and how to channel your behavior toward having a valued life. So a lot of what we speak to our clients about, whether they come to us because they're struggling with divorce or they're having a hard time with depression or they lost someone they love, no matter what we're talking to clients about, even if it's not OCD related, what we're really working on is building a valued life. It is a short life, it goes quick. So, how do we make each moment count? And how do we make our mark on this world and leave it a better place than it was handed to us? And that's a big focus of treatment with clients is, um, it's one strategy with therapy to get rid of the negative symptoms that are dragging you down. Our strategy is let's just bring in so much positive experiences that there's just not room for the negative. You're going to have a beautiful life, is what we're working on.
I love that. And I also love that you mentioned earlier as well that you work with family members or other people who might be involved with the individual. So that way, like you said, it's not siloed. And I think that is huge because, of course, people have these support systems and they lean on these people in their lives. So to bring in everyone together and have that cohesive plan and approach, I think is really awesome. And I'm sure you see like amazing results just from doing that.
Yeah. It's far better. I mean, there was a time when I was in solo practice, and there was a time when I worked for other people's group practices, and it was just like you were ships in the night. You didn't know what was going on anyone else's caseload. And even when I was in solo practice, like I could talk to my peers about, oh, I need help with this case, but trying to manage an entire system, and get it functioning well takes a team.
Yeah.
And not all of our clients need, loved ones involved, like their best friend or their mom or whatever. But if that is a necessary part of treatment, it's something that we can address.
Mhm.
And I've just found that people get better much faster with this approach and that it's more lasting than trying to just kind of little by little chip away at something for an hour in a session, but then people are going back to their normal lives for the entire rest of the week. And if the entire rest of their lives is dysfunctional relationships, then we're up against a mountain here. So
Right.
there's kind of a larger issue to be addressed a lot of the time, and we're
Yeah.
happy to do it. And again, it works much better.
Absolutely. Because like you said, it's like kind of almost if they go back to these dysfunctional relationships and it's almost like undoing all of the hard work that this person put in to kind of get past that and work through it.
Exactly. So if we're working with, let's say, a female who's 35, who's working on confidence building, boundary setting, assertiveness training with us, it's going to be really hard for her to go back. And I mean, she can set boundaries with family members or coworkers or whatever, but it's going to be challenging if they don't understand what's going on and why she's doing this. So educating them about her necessity for boundaries and why boundaries are healthy in relationships and how this could even benefit them, even if it may feel different than the way things have been going. Helping everybody have clarity about what's going on. I think clarity is kindness. So we do a lot of educating. We consider ourselves kind of 50% teachers, 50% therapists. It's not traditional talk therapy where we're just listening and saying, I'm so sorry you feel that way. Like my philosophy when I'm training my staff is if someone's grandma can do it, we're not doing it. That's not what people are coming to us for. So we provide a lot of knowledge about, things that make sense of why you're having these symptoms in the first place, and then practical skills that you can implement, changes you can implement, different ways of just looking at the world,
Mhm.
so that it's not just band-aids like we're going to teach you progressive muscle relaxation or how to count things in the room to distract yourself. Like we're teaching you a new way of looking at life so that you're content, which is
Mhm.
different than happy. You're content with this life. You're okay with it, no matter what happens.
Yeah. I love that quote that you shared. Clarity is kindness. That is such a good quote. And I think it's so true. And of course, totally relates to the work that you're doing with your patients and the individuals that see you.
Yeah. I might have invented that quote. And if I did,
Trademark it.
I'm going to trademark it and make some bumper stickers that you might see around, Kelly Square or something.
I love it. And I'm also curious to hear what inspired you to pursue this as a career path. I mean, in your bio, it was so interesting to read about your advocacy work at such a young age, but let's hear what inspired you to go down this path and what brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally been a lifelong journey. I personally started having panic attacks and OCD symptoms when I was about 4 years old. That's my earliest memory of it. And panic attacks do run genetically in my family. I felt like I was dying of a heart attack. I felt like I was going crazy. And having those symptoms go undiagnosed and untreated just led to them compounding and getting worse and worse, which of course then led to depression. And so I had my own experience of not getting adequate, or even when I did start going into therapy at 15 years old, the therapy wasn't accurate. It wasn't
Mhm.
actually treating what was going on with me, and it wasn't giving me any skills or anything like that. It was just a sounding board for me to just spin out on all of my obsessive thinking, which wasn't particularly helpful. Um, I know you've read my bio, but I'll just talk about it a little bit in this podcast episode that I actually came out of the closet as a lesbian in 1995, which was a completely different century than some of your listeners were born in. It was a very long time ago. It was actually 2 years before Ellen DeGeneres even came out on TV. So there weren't role models in social media like we see today, singers, performers, actors. There wasn't anything to cling to. There weren't laws in the schools protecting children. And so abuse could happen very openly. And I was reporting, so I went to a very large public school outside Washington, D.C., and there were over 3,000 students in the school. It was huge. And I was the only out student at age 15. And that made me a target. But I've always been the kind of personality that puts my neck on the line and is willing to do things to make changes that I think need to be made in the world. And um, it did, it was a very, very challenging time with a lot of bullying, not only by my peers, but by the administration of the school who sanctioned the bullying. And there were no protections for me as a child. And so I went through the yellow pages is what we had back then, and I just started calling attorneys, and I found these two men who were willing to help me for free, and take on my case. And essentially we threatened to sue the school system for not protecting me unless they changed the bylaws and added sexual orientation to the non-discrimination policy for all students in Maryland. And what ended up happening during that time is that a lot of my peers were seeing me out at school, but seeing the pushback I was getting for being out. So they were coming to me for support. And this was really when I mark my career as a therapist starting. I was offering a lot of emotional support to people who were terrified to come out. And this actually included staff members at the school as well.
That's
Um,
amazing.
and so I ended up starting to my knowledge, what was the first gay straight alliance in a public school in the state of Maryland. There were some in private schools at the time, but not in any public schools I was aware of. And we had to hold the groups underground for support. And we would have about 50 people in attendance at any given time. And I would have structured activities. Everybody had notebooks. And I was literally running group therapy for both staff member adults as well as my peers in the high school, trying to get people a safe place to be themselves. And once the school decided to change the bylaws and add sexual orientation to the anti-discrimination policy, then we were allowed to meet on school grounds at that point and have a formal support group. I also left at that point. I graduated at 16 because high school was very hard for me. And I went to New York City where I felt like I would kind of find my people a little more.
Mhm.
And I had a great time at college. And then that was when I started more formally studying psychology and doing more formal clinical work in college and grad school.
Yeah, that is incredible because going back to what you shared earlier, how at that time in 1995, there wasn't openly anyone that people could identify with or feel like they could get support from. So for you to do that for your peers and even staff, like you mentioned at the school, is amazing. And I mean, I always feel like if someone does something that helps at least one person, it's 100% worth it. So for you to do that, that's exactly what you did, is to be able to be that support person for people and help them and walk them through it. And therefore, that just totally led you on your trajectory of your career path that you have today.
Yeah. And that's why I always struggle with like, oh, well, when did you start doing therapy? It's like, I don't know, like maybe when I
Yeah.
was a kid, or like when do you mark it? Do you mark it by when I got my license? Do you mark it by when I graduated grad school? Like, it's a tough question to answer because I feel like I've in various ways just always been doing this work.
Mhm. Absolutely. And so through that advocacy work, is that what kind of, I mean, of course, you, like you said, we're kind of providing these group sessions for people. Is that what made you realize that becoming a therapist is the career path you wanted to pursue? Or did you have like a little bit of an inkling of that prior to this, if that makes sense?
I actually have a diary entry from when I was 12 years old where I wrote down that I want to be a mommy, a psychologist, and a teacher. And so I think I knew very early on where I was headed. In my Dr. Seuss book about me, I don't know if you remember those, but even when I was
Yeah.
a younger kid than that, I wrote down that I wanted to be a mommy and a teacher. And as I said earlier in the interview, a lot of the therapeutic work I do is teaching people what's going on because I think once they understand how this is all working, like what's going on in their head, what an intrusion is, what a compulsive mental reassuring or avoidant response is, once they understand how all the pieces are fitting together, whether that's for OCD or for trauma, like a trauma memory pops in and you try to avoid it, or you try to find how you were responsible for it and could have changed it, or, once they understand how all these pieces are fitting together, they can make improved decisions for themselves. I don't even have to teach people like, oh, you should do this, you should use this coping skill. It just all starts to make sense. Oh, what I was doing before wasn't working. And now I know why all of my efforts weren't getting me feeling better. So, what I probably need to do is basically the opposite of what I was doing and try that out and see if that gets me better results. And so, I do a lot of teaching, and I'm also seminar faculty at Boston College, and I do a lot of talking at conferences and hospitals and things like that to train other providers, whether it's teachers or doctors or nurses or therapists, on how to, at a minimum, recognize these symptoms because OCD is very misunderstood. It's often misdiagnosed as just anxiety or as psychosis. And so, at a minimum, my goal is to get providers educated about just how to identify it so that they can at least refer to a specialist for treatment and not use ineffective or even potentially harmful therapy and interventions to treat OCD and related disorders.
And I'm glad that you brought that up because that thought just came to mind for me, where if it's missed entirely or misdiagnosed, they might get some type of treatment or solution that, like you said, could just do the opposite effect. So, like you
I see
said,
this
being
a
able
lot.
to like identify that and know what the best route is, I think is really, really important.
Yeah, and we see this a lot where, most people become therapists because they want to help people. And so these are well-intentioned people who are using strategies that they were taught in grad school or in postgraduate trainings. But the problem is it's the wrong medicine for the problem. You know, if you're giving baby Tylenol to a migraine, you're never going to make a dent in it. Or if you're telling someone to hit their head over and over when they have a headache, you're going to make it worse. So it might be an intervention that might be useful for something else, like depression or for generalized anxiety, but it may be the worst idea on the planet for OCD.
Mhm.
Um, and I think another issue that we often see is that therapists often get scared to treat complexity, and people are human. And so it's very rare that they come to us with just a singular issue. We often see, you know, that somebody's having some kind of mental health issue and they're using weed every night or drinking, or they're just zoning out and not engaging in life. They're just on their phone or just binge watching TV. And you know, we're not like people can like therapists can get afraid to treat the complexity that's going on. So they focus on just one issue. And
Mhm.
I see that as being a big part of the problem. Like you can fix that one issue, but we've still got a dysfunctional life going on. And
Yeah.
so having the skills and knowledge and just the bravery to treat everything all at once and start with safety issues, you know, so if there's suicidality or self-harming behaviors or just reckless behaviors like speeding or driving under the influence or behaviors that risk other parts of life, like maybe you're calling out from work so much that you're at risk of losing your job. Like we want to address safety issues first, but we also want to address everything holistically. You know, people are very complex, and to neglect the other things that they arrive to our office struggling with would be to miss the point entirely.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Is like they all kind of what we were talking about earlier with like family and other relationships, they're all interconnected. So, like you said, to look at it from that holistic point of view, you get better results, better solutions for the people that you're working with, and really make a bigger impact in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm curious to hear about your career journey. If you started your clinic right away, or if you worked in another practice or clinic before, like I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I had graduated high school early, which means I went to college early, and then right after college, I started at NYU in the advanced accelerated social work graduate program, and um, I didn't really love the program. I don't think social work was for me. I wanted to learn more skills on how to be in the room with a client. The other thing that happened was I was living in New York City during 9/11. And so I myself suffered, in addition to 9/11, several traumas that happened in a 3-month time span around the 9/11 mark as well. And 9/11 impacted any of us who were alive during that time, but to be living in New York City during that time, there was a certain kind of unique impact that that could have on a person, especially when they were 20 years old, you know, that they're just starting out adulthood and you're witnessing massive loss of life and destruction and loss of sense of safety. So, that combined with the program not really being the best fit for me, I ended up dropping out of that program. And I took 7 or 8 years off and continued doing clinical work, but not pursuing my graduate studies or an independent license. I was trying to figure out kind of this didn't work for me. What do I want to do instead? And I ended up returning to graduate school up here in Massachusetts at Lesley University for clinical mental health counseling, but also expressive arts therapies because I'm a very creative, expressive person. And I wanted to be able to weave that in with any clients who might be interested in using the arts or music or writing or anything like that as part of their recovery journey. And that ended up being the absolute best match program for me. Um, while I had been doing those 7 or 8 years of clinical work, I was taking notes on what I did and didn't like about working for other companies and practices and stuff, like what kind of supervisors I liked, what kinds of setups I liked or didn't like. And then in my postgraduate years after I graduated from Lesley with my master's degree, I also took more notes working at other places because I did want to one day start up a practice that, according to kind of my standards and my vision, did it right. And So I did, work solo for a while, worked for some other companies, did a lot of community mental health, a lot of work with homeless individuals, at-risk LGBTQ youth, domestic violence survivors, incest, trafficking, rape survivors. I did a lot of trauma work, and did a lot of work with like extreme mental health issues like florid psychosis and extreme substance abuse and things like that. A lot of work with veterans. So I got a breadth of experience that was really varied. And, one thing I learned through that is that OCD doesn't pick and choose. It was present in all the communities I worked in. And then when I was ready for the next step, I opened the group practice and have intentionally kept it small at this point because I want to make sure that we're churning out really high quality work. And I believed that if, I just added 30 clinicians right away, I wouldn't be able to train and supervise them properly. And I'm very proud of my team. I'm proud of the results that we churn out, how much we all know about everybody's cases, and we all chip in and contribute to everybody's work. And at the end of the day, I wanted a happy, functional workplace. And I wanted that in part because it was a selfish thing. I wanted to be happy when I went to work, but in part because I think when clinicians are happy and feel treated well and are getting enough support, then it bleeds down to clients and the clients receive better care. When clinicians are burnt out and unhappy and don't feel respected by their supervisor or don't feel like support is available when they need it, it affects the clients. And my number one goal is exceptional client care.
Yes, absolutely. What a journey. And it is so evident how passionate you are about the work that you do and how much you truly care about it, which I think is amazing for, of course, anyone that works with you, whether it's other clinicians or even any of the patients that you might have. And I love what you shared earlier about how when you were working with other clinics or other and other jobs and whatnot, that you were taking those notes of like what you liked, what you didn't like, and how it all led you to where you are with Clearview today of being able to take that and mold it to be what you were really looking for right at the very beginning.
Yeah. And it's working so far. So I'm just going to keep ticking along as I am. Yeah.
And I'd love to hear if you have anything coming up maybe in the next year or so that you are working on or you would like to start adding into your clinic or anything exciting that you can share.
Yeah. Well, we just bought the office in Sudbury.
Mhm.
That was in January. And so that was kind of like our expansion plan was, my first vision was Central Mass and Western Mass didn't have an OCD outpatient clinic. Like there were kind of individual OCD providers who again were working in silos, but there wasn't like a functioning clinic that offered these more robust service options. And so that was my first goal when I moved to Central Mass was to open that up. And so once that was accomplished, then the next step was to expand and offer these services in another location. So now we're able to offer them in the Boston Metro West area. We actually do have a lot of clients who even come from neighboring states. They drive over the border and meet with us in order to access services because it's one of the nice things about New England is all the states are very close together, and you
Yes.
can easily just get from one state to another. And so what we're working on right now is expanding. We're offering support groups right now, so that people have a low cost option to still receive services, but also build community. There's so much stigma and self-judgment, and there's so much isolating that goes on with mental health issues. We wanted to start offering spaces where clients can feel like they're not the only one struggling with this. Um, Future plans include expanding the team slowly. Again, that's something where I want to have a high focus on quality control, that we're not just blowing up to this gigantic company, but we're doing it slowly in a methodical way that keeps the integrity of the services that we provide. And then we're hoping to just continue offering what we're offering, which is like in-service trainings at schools and at hospitals and other places to spread awareness about what these disorders look like. We've considered offering an intensive outpatient program eventually where clients can get, services 3 to 5 times a week. Right now, we do offer that on an individual basis. So we do have some clients who meet with us, 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes for 2-hour sessions. They're really trying to get a chunk of learning done at the beginning of treatment and
Mhm.
get on their feet. And again, because so much of it is teaching, that's a format that makes sense. It's not like they're just venting, 3 times a
Right.
week to a therapist. One thing we've been able to do is in the Sudbury office, we have a dedicated child and teen room being a mom myself, I didn't love it when I would bring my kids to therapy and there would just be like a bag of Legos in an otherwise adult space. So our child and teen room in Sudbury was designed with children in mind. There's a really soft, fuzzy rug with like gigantic beanbag chairs, and kids just throw themselves into the room. It's loaded with toys and games and art supplies and therapeutic props. And so we'd like to start running more kind of group-based and community-based events. So workshops on, you know, um, parent coaching, for instance, if you have a high intensity child, whether they have autism or OCD or school refusal, doing some workshops in a group format where people can access that. And the office spaces that we have in the Sudbury office are all built well for small groups to be
Mhm.
held. The other piece eventually that I'd like to bring in is a holistic self-care component. So I would eventually like to have, um, like, say, a dad brings his child to therapy, instead of sitting in the waiting room just doing nothing, they can pop into one of our rooms and maybe just get a 30-minute massage or
Oh, nice.
30-minute Reiki or acupuncture or something. Like, take this minute for yourself because parenting's hard.
Mhm.
Parenting's even harder when you have a kid with challenges. So just take a minute and take care of yourself. So I'd like to be able to offer some of those self-care pieces as well.
Yeah.
Or after a difficult exposure therapy session, go relax in the room next door and,
Totally.
get some sound therapy or a massage or whatever it is you need.
And I'm glad that you brought up the self-care piece because that was one thing that I was thinking about is that in the work that you do, you're holding a lot of space for the people that you work with. And so I can imagine it takes up a lot of like emotional capacity on your end. And so I'm curious to hear how you focus on self-care and make sure that you're recharging yourself and like you said, prioritizing being able to make sure that you're happy and content so that way it kind of passes down to your patients and the people that you work with.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll say it's challenging as a, small business owner and a parent to find a lot of those self-care moments.
Yeah.
And fortunately for me, and I'm really not just saying this, I absolutely love what I do. I love
Mhm.
what I do in terms of my direct clinical work with my own clients. I love supervising and teaching my team.
Mhm.
So those actually are cup fillers for me, even though they're also my job. Um, I'm in my own therapy. I think I've never really, frankly, understood the rationale behind a therapist providing therapy if they've never been in therapy themselves or have only been in a little bit. I really, believe in physician heal thyself. Like, you learn some of your best stuff on how to help people when you're working on yourself and growing yourself.
Mhm.
So I routinely attend my own therapy sessions, and then for me, a lot of it is maintaining healthy, rewarding relationships in my life. My partner, my kids, my friends, my family, those fill my cup a lot. Even if it's just that all I can do for one evening is pop down the street. That's what I'm going to do tonight. Pop down the street and just hang out with my friend at her house for an hour. That's what we're able to squeeze in this week. And for me, a lot of it is art based as well. So I'll do my art as a way of processing and calming down. Singing loudly in the shower helps too. Um,
I love it.
I mean, a lot of it is how you're viewing life. I'll be honest. A lot of it
Yeah.
is, even if a day is tough, I just have this mantra of that works for me. Like, I can turn hardship into this is a growth point. Thank you for giving me a moment to grow more. I'm not afraid of feeling uncomfortable. I'm not afraid of life happening. And I work very hard to stay in the present moment, which is something I teach my clients because that's the only moment that we know what's really going on. The past is gone. You can't unring a bell. The future hasn't happened yet. So you're going to be miserable if you're trying to live in the past or manage the future. So staying in the present moment is one of my biggest ways of engaging in self-care because I don't get too caught up in things that are irrelevant and are going to drag me down. And again, just viewing hardship as that's a situation that benefits me anyway. So I'm fine
Mhm.
with it. Hardship doesn't move me.
That's great advice and a really good like perspective change of looking things from a different lens. And I'm curious to hear for anyone who's listening to this episode who would like to pursue a career in therapy or already is on that career path, what advice would you have for them?
Yeah. I will say that the field has changed so much since I was in the early stages of being a clinician. And this is something I've been reading a lot about, trying to kind of understand the world of what it must feel like to be, whatever it is, 23 years old and entering the field now, because it's just so different. But some advice I would have, first of all, to anyone who's thinking of starting a group practice. I think a lot of people think this is going to be a very lucrative venture that's going to make them millions of dollars. And there are group practice formats that you can open where you would make a lot of money in the first few years. In general, what I've heard is that people are not very happy pursuing that project. It's not aligned with their values. They're not feeling fulfilled. They're bringing in a good amount of money, but it's a mess. They're unhappy, their team's unhappy, the patients aren't getting good care. So it's not aligned with why they went into this field in the first place. So my advice is if you want to start a group practice, be prepared for it to be long hours and a lot of work. If you are really wanting to do it right, you are going to be working 40 to 60 hours a week and you're not going to be taking like you're on vacation, but you're returning emails. You might still be meeting with clients. You might be fielding an email from a parent that's concerned, be ready to give your life to this and you need to be passionate about it. I have friends who own group practices who aren't in love with running it. And I don't really see the point in opening a group practice if you're not going to be absolutely in love with the work that you're doing, because it's a lot of work with little return other than you feel good about what you're putting out there, or you feel good about the team that you're working with. So that's my advice for people thinking of starting a group practice, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about I'm going to make so much money and just
Mhm.
sit back while employees bring in all the money. There's a lot of things that people don't know about overhead costs and the amount of time that you're going to need to invest, and time is money. For people thinking about going into mental health counseling or who already have started that process, my advice would be to be in your own treatment. It doesn't necessarily need to be every single week for the rest of your life, but you need to be popping in once in a while and addressing your own stuff. You're if you're a tool or an instrument for someone else's recovery, you're only as sharp as you're sharpening. So you need to know yourself as the tool or the instrument in order to use that to benefit your clients. So big emphasis on I think therapists should be in therapy at least sporadically. And there's a lot of emphasis right now for new clinicians on niching, on finding a specialty and focusing really hard on that one specialty. Like I'm a trauma counselor or I work with people with autism. I think that's a good idea. I don't love general counseling, because if you're a jack of all trades, it's rare that you're often a master of none.
Mhm.
And I think there is a place for general mental health counseling, but I think we need more specialists where we're cross-referring, like, okay, I need you to help with this part of the case, and we're going to share it, even if we work at different practices, because this person needs your specialty on this and my specialty on this.
Mhm.
At the same time, I think like the messaging that's missing for a lot of new, younger therapists is to get really good training and supervision. So there's, I think, this myth that if you just take like a 4-day training in internal family systems therapy, that then you get a certification, which honestly is a meaningless piece of paper most of the time. And then you can say, I'm certified in internal family systems, and now I'm an expert in it. the best counselors are the ones who get really, really good supervision and are working lots of cases. That's how you learn, is through trial and error, and are getting feedback from a knowledgeable supervisor that's helpful feedback that guides them to being a better clinician. So I think support on your cases is essential.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, such great advice. And I am so appreciative of all that you've taken the time to share, and especially just hearing of your journey from such a young age. I mean, you've done so much. So I hope you are proud of everything that you've done because it's incredible. Like seriously.
Well, again, the goal was just, the world was handed to me a certain way. It wasn't right. It wasn't just. I want to leave this world with a mark on it that made it a better place. That's the
Yeah.
goal.
Yes. I love it. And now for a fun question. I always love to ask people what their favorite local businesses are to support. So I'm curious to hear what yours might be.
Food ones. um, so I'm a bit of a sushi snob, and
Yum.
I have traveled various places and tried all the best sushi according to all the reviews and the Michelin stars and all of that. Kai Sushi in Worcester is amazing, and I highly recommend their omakase, their chef's choice. They turn out fabulous sushi, and I'm proud of them for opening up a new and newly renovated spot. It's beautiful, it's welcoming, centrally located, and the food is still top quality. You're not getting flash frozen fish. They cut down and break down their fish whole. For the same reason, I also like Wooden Bar because they also produce high quality food. For non-food related businesses, I actually love the Worcester Center for Crafts. I think it's a great community space. They do good volunteer and charitable work where they're helping as well as running a business, which is something that I really value, is combining altruistic charitable work with making money and running a business. It's okay to do both. But I like businesses that give back. So Worcester Center for Crafts, I've taken a lot of art classes there. Their staff is always great, and I think that they bring a lot to the community. And I think the final one that I'll plug is Hanmi Taekwondo on Park Ave, and they just opened a second location in Shrewsbury. One of my children has been doing their after school program and other classes with them throughout the years. And I mean, this is like a second family for my kid. These people care. They're safe adults to leave your child with, and they are teaching not just Taekwondo moves and board breaking skills, they're teaching a moral compass and how to be a good citizen of the world and how to have not only positive regard for others, but care for yourself and taking care of you, which I think is a message that a lot of kids miss. And then we see people pleasing adults and then they end up in
Yes.
therapy. So I love the assertiveness and self-care components that Hanmi Taekwondo brings in to teach my child.
Amazing. I love those well-rounded plugs there. You covered the food, arts, and then you also got Taekwondo.
Well, you have to work off the food through exercise. So,
Cool.
so that you've got
Great
it.
connection.
Yeah.
Jayme, this has been a really awesome episode, and I've so enjoyed having you come on to share everything that you've been doing throughout your career and having your clinic. And now I would love to have you share with our listeners where they can find you online in case they'd like to connect.
Yeah. So you can Google Clearview OCD counseling. Also, our website's very easy to remember because I got in the field early before there were a lot of other OCD therapists. So it's literally just OCD-therapy.com. And if you want to email me, the email address is easy, info@ocd-therapy.com. And we would love to help out, even if it's just for one consultation, just to give information. If that's all that somebody's willing to come in and do, we're very flexible on how we reach and help people.
Fantastic. And I will link to all those places in the show notes that our listeners could easily click through and connect with you from there. Thank you so much again for coming on this week's podcast.
Thank you for having me, Ashley.